I'd like to start with the introduction. This is a third lecture from Professor Vastaris, and it is about international marketing. As we all know, he is the one and sole founder behind X Culture, the project founder and coordinator. He's also professor of international business and department head at Brand School of Business and Economics, and he's vice president administration at the Academy of International Business as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. We are going to today talk about international marketing. So thank you so much everyone for joining, and thank you so much Professor for being with us today. We are looking forward to your lecture.
So we will talk about marketing, and I will talk about some of the challenges of doing marketing in the international context. So one obvious challenge when you go international is language. So even British and American English is different enough, and sometimes the meaning of the same words may be quite different. You have here some examples on the screen that I will not read. I should have been probably more politically correct. So, but yes, like for example, to knock up means something very different in the United Kingdom or the United States. Or when the British say, I live in a block of flats, Americans would not understand this. It's not a standard expression here. So there are all kinds of other examples like that. My favorite, by the way, when it comes to language is billion and milliard. So the numbers are actually different in different countries. And so what in the United States is called billion, in the United Kingdom or Europe is a milliard. So basically, the difference could be the number of zeros. And so what is called a billion in Europe is very different from what a billion is in the United States. But anyway, obviously for advertising, it's important. And I'll give you some examples of sort of language bloopers when it comes to international marketing. Like, for example, the Scandinavian, the Swedish company Electrolux, it makes vacuum cleaners. And so when it came to the United States, it used the slogan, nothing sucks like an Electrolux. Makes perfect sense in the context of vacuum cleaners, other than the word to suck in the United States means perhaps something a little bit different than just simply, like a vacuum cleaner suction. It also means to be very bad. So another one that is very commonly mentioned in marketing books is that China's in the 80s, they had this slogan in the United States, come alive with the Pepsi generation. And so when it was translated for the Chinese market, the translation actually read more like Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. So obviously not the best example. This one is from my own collection. So if anyone speaks German here, so you know that the word mist in English means something hazy, something in the air like fog. In German, mist spelled and read or pronounced essentially the same, but it means something a little bit different. Namely, it means essentially manure. And so obviously Irish mist or mist stick are not the best brand names for the German market, even though they're quite popular in the United States, right? So here are more examples again from my own example, from my own experience. So in the 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, we had a lot of foreign brands coming into the market. And so there was this one called Blue Water. And so they had the advertisement, so they decided not to change the brand and used English in the advertisement. And so unfortunately, Blue Water in Ukrainian sounds basically like vomit. And so people were making a lot of fun about it. Another one, this one is a classic, and people say, some say that it's a serious issue, others say that it's not, but Chevy Nova. So it's a car here on the picture. It was popular in the United States, but not so much in Mexico. And apparently one of the reasons, or at least one of the contributing reasons, was that Nova essentially means doesn't go in Spanish. Although my students told me that now there is gas under that brand name, so maybe that was not particularly the only reason. But for example, here is a reason. So Volkswagen, so it had um, Bora, Jetta before that. And so when it got to Bora in the United States, they decided to go back to Jetta because obviously Bora sounds like boring. And so while it's a good name for that third generation of Volkswagen Golf with a hatch in the back, so it's a good name for Europe maybe, but for English-speaking countries, not so much. So same thing I remember Ford Mondeo when it came to Ukraine or former Soviet Union. Again, those of you who speak those languages, it doesn't mean like it means something sort of sounds a little bit like a bad word. So people were making fun of that a lot. This one, it's for adults only, so I will not comment. I will only say that there is this company, again, also out of Scandinavia, with the name Locum. And so in 1991, they decided to add some holiday spirit for the Valentine's Day. And so they decided to replace the letter O with a heart. And so the logo for a while looked like this. And those of you who speak English fluently enough to understand why that's a blooper, I guess here it is for you. So again, I will not do the explanation as we may have underaged people in the audience. Here is another one. I actually took a snapshot of that. So IKEA is known for its interesting names. And so here is a name, Workbench Fartful, that it was selling in Canada, or at least I snapped it from the Canadian website. I lived in Canada at that time. And so that's, well, it's a strange looking bench to begin with, but also obviously the linguistic connotations are a little bit strange. So you have to be careful about these kinds of translations. This one is not so much about language, but rather sort of poorly chosen name. So the global brand Umbro had a shoe, a design, a model that they named Zyklon. And only after they released it in 2002, it was discovered that the name Zyklon was also used by the Nazis for the gas chambers. And so obviously there was a big backlash against the use of that name. And so they had to basically scrap that model, apologize, and forget about it. Here is actually an example of maybe good use of language. So a quite popular Honda Fit, still sold in the United States. In other parts of the world, it actually uses a different name, usually sold as Jazz. So in English, fit is a good name. So it both means fit as like physically fit, but also a lot of stuff fits into it. In fact, they used the advertisement, touting how even though it's a small car, it can fit a lot of people and a lot of luggage into in the car. So, but the word fit in some languages in Europe and Asia essentially is an F word, like a different F word, but same meaning. And so to avoid the sort of the problems with the name, it's sold as Jazz in other countries. Yukta, can you tell me what might be wrong with this picture here, or everyone? I don't know. Can you put in the comments why you think this was a problematic design? So that's Nike Air. So this label here, that's Air. It's spelled AIR, and so it looks like Air Ryan. So why would this be a problem? So why did Nike had to basically get rid of this model altogether? Anyone?
Because according to me, the logo is actually on the sole and it won't be visible, and it looks like defaming. Like I mean, this is the logo of the brand and it's on the sole, so it won't be visible to anyone.
There is a little connection here, but not quite. Yes, so somebody got it right. So the logo Air looks somewhat similar to the Arabic spelling of the name of the god, Allah. And so obviously poor choice to begin with, but then because it's on the sole, that makes it even worse. And so yeah, and so it basically, so they got rid of this logo altogether. So yeah. Second, so switching gears. So first, you have to be very careful when it comes to language and symbols and everything, because again, what's neutral in one culture can be deeply offensive in another, controversial, problematic, and things like that. But another challenge may be when you do marketing or business internationally, knockoffs, so counterfeit. So in some cultures or countries, the copyright laws are such that you cannot counterfeit, you cannot steal brand names. In others, you can. And so even if it's obvious whose name is sort of being copied here. So here is an example of a restaurant that clearly tries to mimic McDonald's. There are some more. Well, this one, I just included it more for fun. So Hilton Hotel, I don't think they are a threat to Hilton's market share, but just, for fun. But here are some examples of where you clearly have some attempts to sort of copy essentially famous brand names. So instead of Microsoft Windows, you have Microsoft Bimbos, Spider-Man or Spider-Person instead of Spider-Man, KLG instead of KFC, Bloomingdale's spelled differently, Livers Club instead of Levi's Club, Windows 98. So at that time we did have Windows 98. So this one is probably just a knockoff copy on a DVD. So and then with stock exchange name. So instead of Starbucks, you have Stars and Bucks Cafe. I actually had a student in my class some years ago who said he actually lived close to this location, so that's in Palestine. And so he said in this case it was not so much a knockoff rather than the real Starbucks didn't want to open a location in Palestine, so they basically had this one instead. So, Tuna, Chima, Poodle, Pimp. So instead of Puma, I don't know why he would put Pimp on his head, on his hat. But so anyway, Crust instead of Crust, S&M instead of M&M, Tid instead of Tide, Nike instead of Nike. So with a slightly changed logo. Yeah, instead of Sony, Nescafe instead of Nescafe spelled differently. Nokla instead of Nokia. I'll actually share here a story from my own experience. So when I was a student in 1993, 94, I went to high school in Germany. And so let me see if I can stop sharing. Yes, so I went to high school in Germany, and my roommate was a guy. At that time, anyway, in Germany, there was a very popular brand. They may still be around called Replay. And so it's spelled, was written actually in very similar font as you see here for this Nokla. And so he was making some money on the side by delivering newspapers and saved up some money and bought himself a hoodie by Replay. Like on the back, it said like Replay. And so he comes to school and everybody is so envious of him. Like this is like a very, very popular brand at that time. You know, he's like a local hero until like, I don't know, like an hour or 2 hours later, somebody notices that it spells not replay, but repay. And so it's the same obvious, you know, a font obviously made to look like Replay, but it's an actual a knockoff with a different spelling. And all of a sudden, from a hero, you look like, you know, not particularly a hero. And so I actually very much at that time got disappointed too because he was my friend and it was quite embarrassing. So that was, you know, not a good experience for a teenager. So, oops. Adidas, again, spelled differently and things like that. All right. So I'll stop here about the knockoffs, again, changing gears altogether. So through my experience, you know, of traveling to different cultures and countries, you know, while I know that some things do not work in some cultures and others do, there are some things that seem to attract people's attention equally well, regardless of the culture. So it seems like, I don't know, biologically, through the course of evolution, we have developed a capacity or interest or propensity to be attracted to certain things. And so, since marketing is all about grabbing attention, so I'll give you some examples of advertisement techniques or attention grabbing techniques that seem to work on all humans equally well. And so here are some examples. I call them mysteries. I guess I probably should have not called them mysteries, but maybe principles. But to me, it's a mystery because they attract attention almost supernaturally. So, like for example, people seem to be attracted to situations when a small action leads to a big reaction. So when like dominoes, when you push one and then many, many of them fall. So we often watch for a long time dominoes literally, you know, falling like some intricate structures and you push one and they fall for like 5 minutes. I remember that when I was in school, so when I was like, I don't know, 10, 12 at that time, maybe, there was a building near my school that was scheduled for demolition. And so we knew that it would be demolished. And so as kids, we would, you know, in a break, we would go to that building, like it's like a, I don't know, 10-story, 10-story building or so, and we would break windows in that building. And so it was so much fun to find a rock and throw it into the window. And then, you know, like a little rock makes a big bang. And so I know that if the windows had plywood in them, nobody would have fun throwing rocks into the plywood windows. But glass, all this, you know, like little rock, boom, glass, you know, breaks. So everyone's very interested. So here is an example of an ad that is probably one of the most successful ads of all time. And so this particular one, it's by Honda. There is no computer graphics here. It's all a real thing. So they used 4 cars. They took several days to shoot it. And so
Isn't it nice when things just work?
So Honda Accord, a very, very clever use of this principle. So people do like these dominoes, and in this case, I guess it's made out of car parts, and so they seem to enjoy it, and so they would watch for free thousands, if not, I mean, billions, literally billions of times the ad that you created. Here is another one. So people are almost supernaturally attracted to unusual things. And so if you can make your advertisement around something unusual, people would be much, much more interested in it and pay attention to it. So here is an example of a hotel that looks, it's somewhere in Montana in the United States. It looks like it's been flipped over upside down, and even the furniture inside is again like screwed to the ceiling, so it looks like it's upside down. And so this hotel is not any more comfortable or any more enjoyable, but people come from far and wide to stay there just because it's unusual. So same thing. So this man draws pictures using his beard. And so I've seen a documentary about him. Sometimes he would hang himself sort of by his feet to a ceiling, and then he swings and uses his beard to draw the painting. I don't know, this particular one does not look to me as of much artistic value. I think my kids can do a better picture, but because it's created in such an unusual way, apparently his paintings cost tens of thousands of dollars just because it's unusual. This one is an interesting story, and if I ever have to open a business that has a physical location, like for example, in my sort of previous life, I had a car dealership and then some other businesses. So if I ever have to do that again, maybe I'll use this technique. So in 1961 in New York, there was this one of the most successful openings of a department store. So what they did was a few weeks before the opening, or maybe a few months, they said that on the day of the opening, they will put 5,000 or $10,000, 10,000 single dollar bills into a cannon, put that cannon on top of the building, and they will shoot those dollars into the air. And so there was a lot of coverage for this department store opening on the national media. Everybody was talking about, wow, this is crazy. They're going to shoot like real money into the air. And then is it even legal? Can you do that with the money and, dollar bills, treasury notes? But can you also do the same thing with, like, can you shoot a cannon in the downtown of a city and things like that? So they got for only $10,000, they got a lot of coverage. Everybody was talking about that. They did it as promised on the day of the opening, but also like thousands and thousands of people showed up. So that was very, 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 very sort of a big deal. For my dealership, actually, when I had my repair shop and, basically I was selling cars, I did also something unusual. I bought one of these small compact cars, like very old without the engine. I painted it bright yellow with like blue daisies on it, and I put it on like a big pedestal at the entrance to the dealership, to the business. And so again, I don't know, now I've seen many do it, but at that time it was so unusual for my native Ukraine. So everybody sort of knew my location. So that became sort of like a local landmark. And so again, cheap, but at the same time, very unusual and attracts a lot of attention. Here is another example. That's a department store in Poland, in Sopot. So just a regular store, but it looks, or made to look as if it's been sort of, like bent and twisted. And again, tourists come to this shop to shop, to this shop to shop, to the store to shop. So they don't have better prices, they don't have better products, but they do look unusual. And so many businesses, many people are willing to pay extra money for something like this just because it looks unusual. Here are some more examples of exploiting the human's interest to unusual things in advertisement. So if there was simply the ad, BMW something, nobody would pay attention. But you add a man here, and all of a sudden everybody like, oh, what's going on there? Is that like a real man or what's? So that's a good idea. So here is another interesting. So this one is a museum somewhere in Russia. Again, looks quite interesting. Yes, Slava Ukraini. Yes, Patrick. Yes. This one's very interesting. I really like it. I'm just responding to the comments if you didn't understand what I meant by the previous phrase. So this one's very, very interesting. So if, now Global at that time, a European cell phone provider, so the mobile phone coverage. So what these guys did in the 2000s, so they took real money, real euros, and they printed over the map the Europe that they had, of the European Union that they had on the map at that on the money at that time, and they printed over basically the advertisement for the company. So here on the map they showed where they already have coverage for Vodafone, and then they also added some, like basically pricing for their roaming. And so again, I don't know to how many banknotes they did it, but it was enough so that people started seeing it. And they got so much free coverage about that. So there was a lot of discussion across the entire European Union. First, it was creative and unusual. Second, there was a whole discussion, is it even legal? Like, can you use real dollars, or in this case, euros, to print advertisement on money? I mean, probably illegal, but I mean, nobody thought about that. So I assume there was no law against it. So, but anyway, for this cheap, creative and interesting trick, they got huge coverage all across the world, in fact, not just in Europe. And so that was quite clever. So I think it's actually illegal, and I'm not sure if you can pull it off, but if you can do it before it's confirmed that it's legal or illegal, you may actually get a lot of marketing mileage for this trick. So the next interesting story or puzzle or mystery is that people seem to be unnaturally or supernaturally or very much preoccupied with having the full collection. Sorry, with this one is a puzzle mystery. So with situations when puzzle pieces fit. So when they fit together, people are like, whoa, that's interesting. Like, for example, again, here is an ad. I don't know what Be Born Again means. I'm not even sure what they advertise. But so the famous Michelangelo painting from Sistine Chapel, what is it, chapel in Vatican? I actually saw it with my own eyes. Sistine Chapel, right? So anyway, the creation of the man. And so here, if it was just simply an ad, you wouldn't pay attention to it. But here it's, like as if the God is extending his finger to the button and you press it and you kind of complete the painting. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's interesting. I can see how people would take photos of this ad, even though otherwise they would have not paid attention. Same thing here. You put an ad of a watch, arm watch on the window, nobody would pay attention. You put it right here and everybody like, oh, that's cool. The puzzle pieces fit together. Or Milka, so that's the chocolate bar. So again, Swiss chocolate or German chocolate, I guess. And so you put it on the elevator doors, and then the doors open, and you see Milka like with the Alps in the background, and all of a sudden it does look like they fit together. And so that's an interesting story. Lots of examples of how ads on buses are used for, using this principle. So like the door opens and the bar goes into the mouth, or the jaws, like the shark opens its mouth. And here are some more examples of this kind of stuff. And yes, somebody says that some of this stuff will never be accepted in some countries. True, but you have to be careful. And that's another, yes, very much true. Ali, you have to be very careful and check the local customs and traditions and maybe even the laws, because again, in some countries, some of these things may be considered, I don't know, essentially breaking the law or breaking the norms. This one, I think this is very, very creative. So like you put one that says McDonald's is 200 meters that way. I guess, useful information. You put two of them and all of a sudden you have this whole story like, yeah, so that's very clever. Here is one for toothbrushes from the 90s when they had those sort of springs in the middle. So yeah, I like this one. So that's a great, clever ad for Duracell for the batteries. So very nice. Here are some more bus ads. This one is very interesting. I actually witnessed this one when I was a kid. They ran something like that in my city. So where they would have like different slogans for the company on different buses. And so it only kind of fits together and makes sense when two buses are one by one. And so people would be standing on the bus stops and usually bored and do nothing. But when this campaign ran, it became almost a game. Like everybody would be looking, and then occasionally the buses actually do align in such a way that the slogan aligns and matches. And somebody like, oh, look, find a perfect match. And everybody like, oh yeah, that's nice. This is good. So that's actually very interesting. So it turns it into like what they now would call gamification, right? So you gamify marketing and people actually want to do it. So here are some more examples when things just fit. Right? This one like ready to quit. So you put anti-smoking ad somewhere and nobody cares. You put it as if the cigarette is actually, emitting smoke. And then like, whoa, this is cool. This is interesting, right? More ads for Duracell. Very nice. And things like that. So here is another one for McDonald's. You stand on this bus stop and you feel like you are in a McDonald's. I can totally see how people would be tempted, start salivating and, thinking about getting a Big Mac or something. So here is one that's very nice, cheap, but very appropriate and fitting. So for a yoga studio, so yoga center. And so just a straw, but all of a sudden, it kind of makes sense in this context. This one for Aruba. I actually went there last winter, last Christmas break. So, but in any case, you put the ad for Aruba somewhere, in a booklet, nobody cares. You put it on the table, and it just kind of fun that you like, just like this gentleman here, you want to snap a photo, right? So very, very clever. Mr. Clean, I'm not sure if it's sold in your country. It's a cleaning product, like Windex type of deal. You spray it and you clean surfaces. And so all of a sudden, like this makes sense. Like if you had Mr. Clean somewhere on the billboard, nobody cares. You make it like this, very, very clever. Now, the last piece, mystery. So people always want to assemble the whole collection. And so they would pay extra and go far to get that last missing piece in the collection. And so here is an example. Like, for example, McDonald's uses this very cleverly. So they have those Happy Meals. And so they would have toys in the Happy Meals, but they make sure to show you that the full collection has this many toys. And then they always say like collect all 8. And so I still remember my kids were small when Madagascar came out. And so we would go sometimes to McDonald's and they would get a toy with a Happy Meal. And so they would have like 3 Alexes and 2 Martys and 5 Glorias, but still no, for example, Melvin. And so they would drag myself, drag my sleeve and say, hey, let's go to McDonald's. I want to get another Happy Meal so that I have all of the characters. And so you really want to have the full complete collection, right? So stop with that one, going completely to a different topic. This one, so marketing, obviously, a part of marketing is packaging. So you need to design your package. And so one of the challenges when you sell the product internationally is that packaging laws are different in different countries. So the package that may be legal or allowed or effective in one country may become completely illegal or ineffective in another country. So these are examples from Canada. So I did my master's in Texas for a few years, but then I did my PhD in Canada. And so when I came to Canada in 2003, I started seeing these kinds of packages all around trash cans. And so having lived before that in Europe, where smoking was extremely popular and, you would see like a regular Marlboro package. And then in the United States, where there were no constraints, I think there might have been some text against smoking on the back of the package, but nothing much. So I come to Canada, I see these packages and I assume, well, so much anti-smoking information on the package. These must be maybe some sort of, medications that people use or take to quit smoking, like some of those Nicorettes or some like nicotine patches. And only later I discovered that that's what cigarettes look like in Canada. So the Canadian rules require that 75% of the package surface is devoted to anti-smoking information. And so the government creates these nasty pictures that basically are designed to make you think about quitting smoking. And so the law requires that these things go on the packaging. And so to me, it was like, whoa, this doesn't look like a regular cigarette package. So I guess now more countries use it, but at that time that was quite progressive and different. Another interesting thing about Canada also is that I had a friend visiting me when I studied in Canada, so a guy from Ukraine, and he smoked. I don't smoke, never smoked, but he did. And so he asks me, so where do you buy cigarettes? I never see anywhere cigarettes being sold. I'm like, I don't know. At that time, I must have lived in Canada for like a year, maybe more. And so like, I don't know, you know what? I've never seen cigarettes sold in Canada. Like they must be selling them, but I don't know. So we go with him to a department like a grocery store and we ask about cigarettes and we say, do you guys sell cigarettes? And they say, oh, yes, we do. I say, or he says, can I buy a pack? And turns out in Canada, the law at that time prohibited any advertisement of cigarettes anywhere. But even in the stores, you could not keep cigarettes visible. They had to be stored behind sort of doors that are not transparent. So they needed to be in cabinets with non-transparent oblique doors. And so when we asked for the cigarettes, they walked us to this corner of the store and they opened that cabinet and they said, okay, which one you want? And he said, I want, I don't know, whichever one he bought, Winston's or Marlboro or something like that, Camels. And then they gave it to him, closed the door again, and that's it. And so the reason for that was that they didn't want, people to be nudged or reminded of tobacco. So the logic was that when you see the cigarette, you start craving the cigarette if you're a smoker. And so to remove that craving, to remove that nudging or prompting, so the laws do not allow you to even not only not to advertise, but not even to display cigarettes. And so that was different. So obviously, as an American tobacco maker, if you want to sell your tobacco products in Canada, the rules at that time were completely different. So, and here are some more examples of this time it's actually Marlboro, but again, in the United States, it's, like it's basically like this first one. Whereas in other countries, often you still have the label, but it looks very different. So, yeah. And then, yes, thank you, Professor Aegis. Yes, there are rules about how old the person can be to buy tobacco products or alcohol products for that matter. Although, so in Canada, you have to be 18, but I think the drinking age in Canada is also 18 or 19. Oh, you say now it increased to 21. Okay. But I know that in the United States, the drinking age is 21, and in Canada, it used to be 18. So American kids would sometimes go to Canada to have, to drink. But yeah, evidently it's changed since I left Canada. Yes. This one's also from Canada, very interesting. So people, for some reason, or not for some reason, for a known reason, but perhaps not a perfectly rational reason, but people prefer to buy local products, thinking that when they buy local, they benefit the local manufacturers or producers. And so especially in countries that are highly patriotic like Canada, so people prefer to buy Canadian products as opposed to, for example, American products. So they feel that they help Canadian businesses, companies when they buy Canadian products. And so there is an incentive to label the products made in Canada for Canadians, made in America for Americans, made in Egypt, I assume, for Egyptians, and so on. And so in Canada, the rules are that you can call the product. So in Canada, they use product of. So instead of made in, they call it product of. And so product of Canada can be labeled as of Canada if 70% of the added value of that product was generated by a company registered in Canada. And so it's interesting that in Canada, and this is a real photograph, in Canada, you can buy pineapples that are product of Canada. Well, Canada is actually not as far north as many people think, like Ontario, for example, is as far south as Italy. And so Ontario grows grapes and oranges, and then also BC has such a climate that they can grow oranges as well and grapes. But Canada is not warm enough for pineapples. And it's kind of funny that you can buy pineapples in Canada that are product of Canada. And the reason for that is that by the time that can gets on the shelf of Canadian Superstore, for example, or Costco, the fruit itself inside the can is less than 30% of the value of this product, because much of that is transportation, marketing, financial, I don't know, packaging itself, like the aluminum can or whatever metal can that they use for it. And so in the final total cost, let's say $2 for the can, only a small portion is the actual cost of the fruit. And because of that, if the company that sort of commissioned the production of this product and paid for the packaging, transportation, marketing, accounting, whatever else, design of the package, so if that company spent more than 70% of the value of the product to put it on the shelf, then yes, you can label it as product of Canada. And so this is kind of funny in my opinion, because, pineapple cannot be a Canadian pineapple unless some greenhouse may be grown, but they probably are from Mexico or from the United States. Here are some examples from my experience. So I'll show you one advertisement. Actually, maybe let me start with that, and then I'll tell you a story that my student, I have it in my office, maybe should have brought it here. But anyway, here is an advertisement for BMW that was run in the United States in 2011, the Super Bowl, like the biggest sporting event. Incidentally, I actually have this very car in this very color. It's just a little bit younger, but still very much the same. I hope the sound will be good, but it will say like the keywords in this ad are made in America, designed in America, made in America, even though you obviously know that BMW is not an American company, right? So, but anyway, here is them.
Does it make sense that a German car company would break ground in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and call it home?
Does it make sense that in the height of a recession, when most companies were bailing out,
That they would dig in, that they would find their latest design in California?
and customize it in 10 million different ways? Does it make sense?
Does it make sense
Does it make sense
that a small town in the South,
to make every X3?
Every X3 in the world.
it makes perfect sense.
The all-new BMW X3. Designed in America, built in America.
So again, I hope the sound was good, but the whole message here is designed in America, built in America, South Carolina. So yes, my BMW was made in South Carolina. I bet they would not run this ad in Germany. I don't think Germans would appreciate that the car is made not in Germany. So in Germany, they probably tout the German origin of the car. But in the United States, they're trying to basically look more local. So anyway, I had a student some years ago who gave me as a gift a frame of a bicycle. He was working here in a bicycle shop here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And he said one of the tasks that he was given while working in this was to peel off the labels of those bikes that said made in China and instead put on top labels that say designed in the United States. So apparently those bicycles were designed in the United States, made in China. And so they thought the customers will be happier, will buy them more readily and pay more if the origin was listed as the United States, if only as designed in, as opposed to made in China. And so here's another example. So if you ever bought a iPhone, actually, I'm curious, put that in the comments. So in the United States, when you buy an iPhone or any Apple product for that matter, a computer, Mac, so it always says on the back, designed in California. So yeah, designed by Apple in California. So here it actually says assembled in China, and I think maybe that's the new rule, but often you just see the California part. And so obviously they are made in China. So, but Apple always tries to hide the Chinese place of assembly or making of the product and try to highlight the American origin, at least if it's only design. Right. And so I'm curious if they do it overseas as well, like in the United States, for obvious reason, they want to highlight the American connection. But I'm curious, I don't know, like when you buy an iPhone in India, for example, Yukta, does it say California or China? Have you paid attention to those things? So if anyone still have a case, maybe check that. I'm curious if it's only an American thing. Anyway, another thing like McDonald's obviously is an American company, but in Canada, they always put the Canadian maple leaf on the logo to highlight the Canadian sort of connection. And in the ads, they always say that even though the company is American, but the franchisees, it's a franchised company. So the franchising, like the actual restaurants are owned by Canadians. And so, yes. So switching gears one more time. So that's the last topic. So some of the challenges related to labeling. So in different countries, you may have different rules about these things. And so here's an interesting story that was around the word chocolate. So when the European Union was going through some of their harmonization, legal revisions, they discovered that chocolate had different definitions in different countries. And so people pay more for what they believe is chocolate and less for what they believe is just candy, like a sugar bar, even though in reality, I guess it's not that different. But anyway, in some countries like Germany, like Belgium, Netherlands, you could only label the candy bar as chocolate if it contained pure cocoa beans. So basically it had actual chocolate in it. Whereas in other countries like UK, Denmark, Portugal, anything that looked brown and sweet, you could call it chocolate even if it didn't have cocoa beans in it. And so there was this big scandal about that. And because, it's a competitive advantage. So obviously the real chocolate is more expensive to make, but the consumers usually don't know the difference. And so countries with different laws basically had different competitive advantage. And so they had this big case where they were arguing, so what you can and cannot label as chocolate. Likewise, organic, natural, and things like that. So organic food is a big market in the United States. The organic foods share in total food market is growing. And so, but in different countries, you have different labeling requirements. Like in the United States, we don't really have rules about what can be labeled as organic or not. So essentially, you can call it organic, whatever you want. And so for some products, you may have like local associations that sort of have some rules, but the government does not mandate what should be labeled as organic. Europe, on the other hand, has much stricter laws. So they have like very strict labeling requirements when it comes to GMO, use of antibiotics, what is organic, what is inorganic. And so again, like you could sell Coke in the United States labeled organic, but it would not be allowed in other countries to do the same, to do the same. This one, so I think, I put too much information here, so I guess, you have the answer. But anyway, I was actually teaching this very course in Colombia in 2011. And so as I was preparing my lecture, this story came up. So these are some of the pictures L'Oreal used for the product. They called it the eraser. So it was some sort of a cream that you basically, put on your skin, and presumably it reduces the visibility of wrinkles. So it moisturizes your skin and somehow reduces the wrinkles. And in the United Kingdom, these same pictures with these same uses were banned. And so the reason for that is that in the United States, there are no rules who can be on the picture and whether or not that picture can be digitally altered. And so here they would take the pictures of, in this case, Julia Roberts and Christy Turlington. And so then they Photoshop them. So they basically made those ladies digitally, made them look younger. And then obviously the implication or the message in the ad was that, well, if you use the eraser, your skin will look like this. In the United Kingdom, they said, no, that's misleading advertisement. This is basically Photoshop. It's not like they were wrinkled and then they use the product and now that's what they look like. So they don't look like that. So that's Photoshop. And so that would be misleading advertisement. So in the United Kingdom, you could not use Photoshop for ads. In the United States, you could. And so L'Oreal had to make all kinds of changes to advertise the product in the United Kingdom. Another one, obviously, is what you put into, like basically the ingredients of the product. So in the United States, that are much, much more relaxed. So in Europe, you have to list everything. In the United States, you only have to list the big ones, so to speak. And so you can put all kinds of things, My favorite, actually, I should have included the picture, but I don't. So Yukta, let me ask you this, and I'll ask everyone. So actually, I'll give you a gold star if you tell me why. Tic Tacs, right? Yeah, Tic Tacs. So
Yes.
Tic Tacs are exactly, so the weight of one Tic Tac is 0.49 grams. 0.49 grams. Can anyone tell me why the weight is precisely 0.49 and not 0.5? If you give me the answer, I'll give you a gold star, a virtual gold star. But there is a very, very important reason why it's 0.49 and not 0.5, not half a gram, but just a fraction below half a gram. Anyone knows why? And there is a very, very good reason for that. Not psychological reason. No, nobody really knows. In fact, most people, I bet you didn't know that it was 4.9. So not psychological, not size, not toxic. No, good tries.
One could be because it's standardized, let's say 0.49 is standardized globally. Again, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so people say 4.99. No. I'll give you another hint. On the packaging of Tic Tac, it says 0 sugar. It says 2 calories, 0 sugar. So there is something with sugar that makes it 0.049. Sorry, 0.49. There is a sugar reason for that. Okay, yes, you again, and so lots of comments. Yes, so the rules in the United States say that if the content of sugar and other ingredients in the one serving size, which for Tic Tac is one pill, is less than half a gram, you do not have to disclose it, and you can actually say does not contain sugar. Now, Tic Tacs is 100% sugar. It's like 99% sugar. It's a sugar pill. Nothing, like it's sugar with some flavored coating. But because they made the weight of the pill 0.49, it's below the threshold of half a gram. And even though it's essentially pure sugar, legally they can say sugar-free does not contain sugar, even though it's almost so if it was 1 gram, they would have to say 100% sugar or 1 gram of sugar. But if it's 0.49, the law allows them to lie to me and say it's sugar-free. So if I ate a kilogram of Tic Tacs, I would have actually eaten 990 grams of sugar. But the law is here, yes. So that's, interesting story that, it's legal as opposed to anything else. All right. So, and same thing here, like what is product of Switzerland? In the United Kingdom, there is a company called Cadbury, Cadbury Sweepers, or Sweeps, I guess. And so anyway, they were making chocolate and branding it as Swiss bar, even though it was made in the United Kingdom. And so when confronted about that, they said, well, we used Swiss recipe. And so, but they deliberately put like a picture of Swiss Alps and Swiss, kids with Swiss national suits on the cover to make it look like it's a Swiss chocolate, because apparently nobody cares about British chocolate, but everybody thinks that Swiss chocolate is good. And so by pretending to be Swiss, you can charge more. The Swiss chocolate makers were not amused. We have time for one more example. So another switching gear, and that's culture in this case. So how culture plays into the ads globally. So the United States is what we call an individualistic culture. So in the United States, we sort of like to advertise and promote individuality, being different. And so anyone knows, by the way, why it's iPhone, iMac? Anyone knows the story? Why is it I? So many people think that it's, like it actually works very well culturally. So it does look like, my individuality. Some people think that it's for information. The truth is, no, it has nothing to do with information. The original story has nothing to do with information, though for marketing, it is, yes, it sort of emphasizes individuality. But no, Steve Jobs was a co-founder of Apple. Then he was kicked out by the board when Apple was not doing particularly well. Then he created his own company called Next. And then he also played something with, what was that, cartoon studio, DreamWorks. But in any case, then he came back when Apple reacquired Next, and they made him a CEO, but they were not ready to make him CEO right away. So they made him interim CEO, like temporary CEO. And so he was not happy about that. So he signed his title as interim CEO and then ICEO. And then he became so fond of that ICEO title that he said, well, you know what, instead of making a Mac, we'll make iMac. And so people were like, okay, this I actually appeals to American individualist culture. And then since then, they started making everything I. So before that story, it was just simply a Mac computer. But then after it became iMac, iPhone, everything else I. But anyway, while in the United States, they emphasize individuality, in Asia, it's more of a collectivist culture. And so that's where you want to emphasize collective. And so like Sony, the first Walkmans in Sony, by Sony in Japan actually had 2 sets of headphones, because it was perceived to be unethical to sort of, to listen to music by yourself. So they would actually try to emphasize the collective part. And so here's an example of a McDonald's Happy Meal in the United States. So here, as you will see, they emphasize originality, individuality.
Funky, funky, funky. Everybody clap your hands. Clap, 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 clap your hands. Clap, 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 clap your hands. Right foot, let's stomp. Cha-cha, real smooth. Turn it out. 1 hop this time. Right foot, 2 stumps. Left foot, 2 stumps. Slide to the right. Slide to the left. Crisscross. Get funky with it. Oh, yeah. Come on. Cha-cha now, y'all. Everybody clap your hands. Come on, y'all. How low can you go? Can you go down low? All the way to the floor? I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.
So here you see the ad that clearly emphasizes the individuality of the boy. He's wearing bright colors. He looks very different. And so when I show this ad in my American classrooms, students giggle, they sympathize with the boy, they find it very interesting. When I try to show it to my students in Asia, when I'm invited as a guest speaker, many of them are like, whoa, this is so inappropriate. The dude, not only he's dressed like a parrot, he comes late to the family dinner. He doesn't greet his parents. He just does all this, blah, 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 and then he just gets up and leaves. Come on, that's that's very inappropriate. So, but for American audiences, it works very well. And here is the same ad or same product, an ad from the Philippines, I believe. So this one, McDonald's, again, Happy Meal, but this one emphasizes obviously the collective, the social, the community aspects of the product.
tuwing pumupunta ako dito, naaalala kong lahat. Parang kahapon lang.
Kamukha mo si Paloma.
Parang ang tagal na namin magkakilala.
Nung tayo ay bata pa.
Yung mga gusto ko, gusto rin niya. Tapos biglang,
Magkahawakan ating kamay at walang kamalay-malay na tinuruan mo ang puso ko na umibig na tunay.
at kahit hindi rin naging kami sa huli, siya pa rin ang first love ko.
So as you can see, it's all about spending time together, holding hands. So it's not about individuality, it's about the collective. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. Let's see if we have any last minute questions before we finish the lecture, or maybe comments. And from my end, if you have any stories of international marketing blunders or stories, I would be very much interested in hearing them. So maybe if you can share them with me by email, I would actually be very interested in collecting or expanding my collection of such stories.
What criteria for assessing whether an advertisement is misleading or not, and they mean that digitally retouched?
That's an excellent question. So I guess what you would need to do instead, I don't think there is a set of universal criteria, but most of the time you would need to have like a focus group. And so you run it and test it with locals. That's, by the way, why X-Culture is so valuable to the companies that we serve, because we have what I call global expertise locally. So if your product name or product color or logo means something bad in another culture, so we would have a student there who will tell, oh no, you know, like you. So McKinsey, Deloitte, whatever other clients, consulting companies you hire out of Boston or whatever, New York. So they may not know, but X-Culture will have a local student who will spot that problem right away. Anyway, so I've seen a rep of the next meeting pop up for a second. So Drew, so yes, we know. Yukta, somebody else needed to say a couple of words, or did I use up all time?
I think just one question about ad donation that they have.
I think your microphone is muted, and I'm not sure the sound is a little strange, but we hear you, but we don't hear you.
Right now. Is it better?
Oh, you are on. Okay. Yeah, on the phone. Yeah. So what? But what's the remaining question in the remaining 1 minute?
Just one last question that we have is what ad used for donation? Are the ads that are used for donation same all around the world or not?
Oh, like what platform you can use for donations, or yeah, I don't know. I mean, one thing I will say when it comes to donations,
any ad that seeks any donation.
well, one thing I will say about donations is that the effective ones look at a single person, because once it's about a large group of people, then it becomes statistics. So I know that all of those donations ads, they always show like one specific kid whom you can presumably help, instead of millions of kids who are starving or dying or whatever it is. So, but again, I'm no expert on collecting donations, and advertising for that. So it's an interesting topic though. Anyway, let's stop here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yukta, for hosting the meeting. Great comments, everyone. So thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Vas for sharing his amazing insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.